Wright. I'm a political scientist. I teach and do my research at American University in Washington, D.C. I mainly study issues of immigration and identity, and I want to know what people want out of their immigration policy and why. In this particular workshop, I'm presenting a sort of a 40,000 foot view of what people want in terms of immigration. And the main thing that I'm pushing back against a little bit is this idea that Americans are, in the big picture, sort of fundamentally concerned with race when they think about these kinds of things, and that they are basically cynical when it comes to immigration, anti-immigrant, mean-spirited, all of that kind of stuff. And so what I am trying to show is that that's not really the case for most people, that some people are like that, but that in fact most Americans are not. They tend to have a pretty wide array of opinions about immigration, about what they want for various different kinds of policies. They tend to be pretty persuadable. And they tend, on balance, to think immigration is a good thing for the country. And this is even in the era of Donald Trump and all the stuff we see in the news these days. So my message is essentially optimistic, and that we're not. It's not as bad as it looks, maybe. So for us, and this is a project that I'm working on with my colleague Morris Levy at University of Southern California. For us, values is basically a set of expectations that people have about what, excuse me, about what society owes them and what they owe in return. And so people have an idea of a kind of a social contract in their head. Here's what you do when you come to Canada. Or here's what you do when you come to the U.S. You pay taxes, you work hard, you learn you learn the language, and stuff like that, right? And these are the things that sort of form a kind of a social contract. People don't necessarily think of it that way, but they still sort of apply these values when they make decisions. And so when they think about immigrants or a policy or something like that, when a pollster asks them a question, they sort of unconsciously or subconsciously apply these values to think, okay, does this signal that immigrants are making due on their end of the social contract or not? Um, in addition, we sort of talk about another set of values, which is people's sort of basic proclivity towards humanitarianism. So if you remind people that we admit immigrants because they have a terrible time for one reason or another in their home countries, then people will become a lot more favorable. Generally, people are assimilationists in a fairly weak sense. That's one part of the values picture. Another part is they like hard work, and they're fairly egalitarian. Another part of that is people are humanitarians. So all of these things sort of play a role in how people consider, what it is that they want. Basically, what we need more of is we need to understand more about the specific sets of values that come into play, more how politicians manipulate those values to get people to do what they want. Basically, one of the things that we point to is that values are a double-edged sword, and so you can include on the basis of values if you're talking about a humanitarian appeal or something like that. You can also exclude, right? So if you talk about legality and the rule of law, this becomes a basis on which politicians in the U.S. and in other countries have sort of acted against illegal immigration, and they justify walls and terrible things like that. And so they do that on the basis of values too, right? So the question is to understand how elite discourse shapes what values are out in the public sphere. I'd say also another thing to think about is whether or not the arguments that I'm making in the American context apply in Canada, which is a fairly, I would say, understudied and interesting question.